country with almost no roads, no railways, and barely any money, just became one of the most important trade corridors in all of Asia. And the country that made it happen spent $20 billion to do it. Not on its own land, on someone else's. We are talking about China building a high-speed railway straight through the heart of Laos, one of the smallest and poorest nations in Southeast Asia. A country so wrapped in mountains that for most of its history, moving a truckload of rice from one city to another could take an entire day. And in just 5 years, that same journey now takes a couple of hours by train. But here is what makes this story genuinely wild. This was never really just about helping Laos. There is a much bigger game being played here. One that involves trade routes worth hundreds of billions of dollars. A decades-old dream of connecting China to Singapore by rail, and a chain of effects that is now pulling Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and the rest of Southeast Asia into a completely new era. By the end of this video, you are going to see a part of the world you thought you knew in a completely different way. Let's get into it. The country that geography forgot. To understand why this railway is such a massive deal, you first need to understand just how isolated Laos used to be. And I mean isolated in a way that is hard to fully picture unless you look at a map. Laos is completely surrounded by other countries. Thailand to the west, Vietnam to the east, China to the north, Cambodia and Myanmar on the other sides. No coastline, no port, no direct access to the ocean. In global trade, having no port is like showing up to a race with no shoes. You can still try, but everyone else has a serious head start. And the land itself made things even harder. The northern half of the country is almost entirely steep mountain ranges cut by deep river valleys. Building roads through that terrain is expensive and slow. Maintaining them is a constant battle. And for a country with very little money to begin with, that combination of bad geography and limited resources created a trap that lasted for generations. Before 2021, Laos had almost no railway at all. The only rail line in the entire country was a 7-kilometer stretch near the Thai border, a leftover from the colonial era. 7 kilometers. That is roughly the length of about 70 football fields placed end to end. It connected to nothing meaningful. It served almost no one. It was basically a historical footnote sitting on the edge of the country. So, what did Laos rely on instead? Trucks. Slow, expensive trucks grinding up and down narrow mountain roads. A journey that might take 45 minutes on a flat highway could stretch into 4 or 5 hours in the Lao Highlands. Farmers watched their crops go bad in transit. Tourists skipped the country entirely because getting around was just too painful. And the major trade routes moving goods between China and Southeast Asia bypassed Laos completely, flowing instead through Vietnam, Thailand, and Myanmar. Laos was not invisible because it lacked resources or hardworking people. It was invisible because geography had essentially locked it behind a wall. And for decades, nobody had found a real way through that wall. But a conversation had been brewing for a long time, and it was about to get serious. The dream that almost never happened. The idea of connecting Laos to China by rail goes back further than most people realize. As early as the early 2000s, Lao government officials were already talking seriously about building a modern railway from the capital city of Vientiane up to China's Yunnan province in the north. The logic was straightforward. Laos sits right in the middle of the path between China and the rest of Southeast Asia. A railway through the country could flip the entire situation. Instead of being a place everyone went around, Laos could become a place everyone went through. From a dead end to a shortcut. From invisible to essential. But the plan kept running into walls. The cost was enormous. Financing was uncertain. A major corruption scandal inside China's railway sector caused delays that rippled across the project. And when people looked at the numbers honestly, it seemed almost absurd. Laos had a small economy. Taking on a project worth billions of dollars felt like a family earning $30,000 a year, signing up for a $10 million construction loan. The years passed, negotiations dragged, the railway stayed an idea. Then in 2013, China launched what became known as the Belt and Road Initiative. This was Beijing's grand strategy to build roads, railways, ports, and pipelines connecting dozens of countries across Asia, Africa, and Europe. The goal was to make trade faster, cheaper, and more tightly woven across the entire world, with China at the center of that web. And suddenly, Laos was not just a small country with a transportation problem. It was a missing link in something much bigger. China needed a reliable land route heading south towards Southeast Asia. Laos sat directly in that path. The geography that had been Laos's curse for generations was now its greatest asset. In 2016, the two governments finalized the deal. China would fund the overwhelming majority of the $6 billion cost for the Laos section through loans. Laos would take on its share through a joint venture arrangement. The numbers were staggering. $6 billion represented nearly half of everything Laos produced as an economy in an entire year. But the potential reward, turning a landlocked nation into a regional transit hub, was too big to walk away from. Construction was set to begin. And what came next was one of the most ambitious building efforts Southeast Asia had ever seen. Building through the impossible. The railway inside Laos runs 414 kilometers, stretching from Vientiane in the south all the way up to the Chinese border in the north. From there, it links directly into China's existing rail network in Yunnan, connecting all the way up to the city of Kunming. The full cross-border system, when you include the Chinese side, carried a price tag of around $20 billion. And this is not some slow rural train rattling along at 50 kilometers an hour. The line is fully electrified, built on standard gauge track, and designed for speeds up to 160 kilometers per hour. Fast enough to turn a journey that once took a full day by road into a comfortable few hours by train. But building that kind of railway through northern Laos meant solving problems that most engineers never have to deal with at this scale. Construction officially began at the end of 2016. Thousands of workers spread out across the country, setting up camps, cutting access roads, and beginning the enormous task of surveying the terrain. Before a single tunnel could be drilled or a single bridge could be anchored, teams had to deal with something no one had planned for in the original schedule: unexploded bombs.
Every barrel from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar must exit through this single 33-kilometer gap. The bypass exists on paper. 32 kilometers of mountains stand between the Persian Gulf and open ocean. This is how you remove them. This mountain range is the only thing preventing the bypass. And it is one of the most hostile terrains on Earth. 2,087 meters of Hajar limestone. No roads, no infrastructure. The most rugged peninsula in the Arabian Gulf. Hajar limestone, hard, fractured, full of cavities. The same rock that forms cliffs dropping into the sea. Panama Canal, 77 kilometers through flat jungle. This bypass, 32 kilometers through vertical mountains. Shorter, the survey points, every piece of equipment flown in by helicopter. The survey alone takes 2 years. At 40 meters, the drill finds nothing.